In 1995, a psychologist published a book that quietly dismantled one of the most deeply held beliefs in modern science. The claim was simple but explosive: your IQ, the number that schools and corporations had spent decades treating as the holy grail of human potential, accounts for only about 20% of success in life. The other 80% is driven by something entirely different. Something schools rarely teach, employers rarely measure, and most people never even think to develop. That something is emotional intelligence. And the research behind it is more convincing than almost anyone realizes. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover exactly why emotional intelligence outperforms IQ as a predictor of life success, what the science actually says versus what most people assume, and how the highest performers in every field from medicine to business to athletics have quietly mastered a set of skills that have nothing to do with raw brainpower. We will also get into the one finding that genuinely shocked researchers when they first uncovered it, something that completely reframes how we think about talent, potential, and what it means to be truly intelligent. To understand why emotional intelligence matters so much, you first need to understand what it actually is. The concept was formally introduced by psychologists Peter Salovey and John Mayer in 1990, but it was Daniel Goleman, in his landmark 1995 book simply titled Emotional Intelligence, who brought the idea to mainstream attention. Goleman defined emotional intelligence as a cluster of abilities: the capacity to recognize your own emotions, manage those emotions effectively, recognize emotions in other people, and use that understanding to navigate relationships and decisions. He broke it down into 5 core components: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. These 5 elements, Goleman argued, were far more predictive of who thrives in life than any standardized test score. Now here is where the science starts to get genuinely interesting. Researchers at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence conducted large-scale studies across schools, corporations, and military organizations. What they found, consistently, was that people with higher emotional intelligence performed better at almost every meaningful metric. They had stronger relationships, made better decisions under pressure, led more effective teams, and reported significantly higher levels of personal well-being. And crucially, these advantages held up even when researchers controlled for IQ. That means even among people with identical cognitive abilities, the ones with higher emotional intelligence still came out ahead. The business world has generated some of the most compelling data on this. A study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that emotional intelligence was a stronger predictor of job performance than IQ across a wide range of occupations. TalentSmart, one of the largest providers of emotional intelligence testing in the world, tested over 1 million people and found that 90% of top performers scored high in emotional intelligence. Meanwhile, just 20% of bottom performers did. The financial gap is striking too. Their research showed that people with high emotional intelligence earn an average of $29,000 more per year than their counterparts with lower scores. But here's what nobody talks about when they cite these numbers. It is not just that emotionally intelligent people are better at managing feelings. The deeper mechanism is about decision-making under uncertainty. The human brain processes emotional information faster than rational information. When you walk into a high-stakes negotiation or a difficult conversation with a colleague, your emotional system fires before your logical system even wakes up. People with developed emotional intelligence have essentially trained themselves to work with that system instead of against it. They do not suppress emotion. They read it, interpret it, and use it as data. Antonio Damasio, a neuroscientist at the University of Southern California, spent years studying patients with damage to the emotional processing centers of their brains. These patients had perfectly intact IQs. Their reasoning abilities were completely normal. But they made catastrophically poor decisions in everyday life. They could not hold down jobs. Their relationships fell apart. They struggled to make even simple choices because they had lost access to the emotional signals that normally guide judgment. Damasio called this somatic marker hypothesis, and it revealed something profound. Rational intelligence without emotional intelligence is not just incomplete. It is genuinely dysfunctional. Now let us look at what emotional intelligence actually looks like in practice, because this is where the abstract research becomes viscerally real. Consider the career trajectories of 2 equally talented engineers hired at the same company. Both have engineering degrees from top universities. Both score in the 95th percentile on technical aptitude tests. 5 years later, one has been promoted twice and is leading a team of 12 people. The other is still doing individual contributor work and has cycled through 3 different managers. The technical skills are identical. What separated them was entirely in the emotional domain. One of them learned how to read a room, manage conflict, give feedback without triggering defensiveness, and motivate people who were different from themselves. The other never did. This pattern has been documented across virtually every high-stakes profession. In medicine, studies have shown that physicians with higher emotional intelligence have patients who are more compliant with treatment recommendations and report higher satisfaction with their care. In law enforcement, officers trained in emotional intelligence de-escalate dangerous situations at significantly higher rates. In athletics, sports psychologists have found that elite competitors who manage pre-performance anxiety effectively outperform objectively more talented athletes who cannot regulate their emotional states under pressure. The educational research is particularly striking because it directly challenges the primacy of IQ from the earliest stages of development. A famous study called the Marshmallow Experiment, conducted by psychologist Walter Mischel at Stanford in the late 1960s and followed up for decades, tested 4-year-olds on their ability to delay gratification. Children who could wait for a second marshmallow, demonstrating basic emotional self-regulation, went on to have higher academic achievement, better social functioning, lower rates of substance abuse, and higher earnings as adults. The predictive power of that single behavioral test rivaled the predictive power of IQ scores gathered years later. What those children were demonstrating was not intelligence in the traditional sense. It was emotional governance. Here's the deeper insight that reshapes everything. Emotional intelligence is not a fixed trait. Unlike IQ, which remains relatively stable across a person's lifespan, emotional intelligence is highly trainable. Neuroscience confirms this. The brain regions associated with emotional processing, particularly the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, maintain significant plasticity well into adulthood. Deliberate practice in recognizing emotional patterns, pausing before reacting, and building perspective-taking skills genuinely reshapes neural architecture over time. This is not self-help speculation. It is measurable structural change visible on brain imaging studies. Programs that teach emotional intelligence in schools have demonstrated lasting improvements in academic performance, reduced disciplinary incidents, and stronger peer relationships. Corporate training programs focused on emotional intelligence have shown return on investment ratios that routinely outperform technical skills training. The United States Army has integrated emotional intelligence training into leadership development. Programs after research showed it reduced unit conflict and improved mission performance. What does all of this mean for how we think about potential and success? It means the narrow, IQ-centric model of human capability that has dominated institutions for over a century is fundamentally incomplete. A high IQ opens doors. It provides access to information, to complex problem solving, to pattern recognition at scale. But what determines whether a person walks through those doors, builds something meaningful once they are inside, and brings others along with them, that is almost entirely emotional. The most consistently successful people are not necessarily the most cognitively brilliant. They are the ones who understand themselves clearly enough to stay grounded under pressure, read others accurately enough to build trust, and regulate their inner world well enough to sustain effort through inevitable failure. The takeaway from all of this research is not that IQ does not matter. It clearly does. The takeaway is that IQ is a ceiling, not a guarantee. Emotional intelligence is the force that determines how close you actually get to that ceiling, and whether you ever move beyond it. Before you go, if you learned something new today, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe to Brain Boost Academy for a new video every single day.